So we have institutions and checks and balances that are separate from the president. You can see time and time again, Donald Trump is trying to bully other institutions under his wing. So we can look at Jerome Powell at the Federal Reserve. If you look at countries where the president is able to control monetary policy, these are some of the worst countries in the world, right? You do not want the president controlling monetary policy. This has happened in countries like Venezuela. Let's take this over to the DOJ. You do not want the president directing the DOJ to prosecute people, to indict people, and that is exactly what we saw.
In today's video, Adam Mockler obliterate Lydia Moynihan on NewsNight with Abby Phillip as tensions rise over the firing of Pam Bondi and growing concerns about political influence in the Department of Justice. As Lydia Moynihan defends the move, Adam Mockler pushes back, questioning the impact on DOJ independence and accountability. So let's dive in and watch how Adam Mockler shuts down Lydia Moynihan on NewsNight with Abby Phillip.
Ellie Honig is here with us in our fifth seat, former federal prosecutor in his own right. Ellie, she's in the unenviable position of being hated by a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. Yeah. What do you think is the real reason that she shouldn't have a job right now?
Well, the reason she shouldn't have a job or the reason she doesn't have a job? The reason she shouldn't have a job is because she carried out Donald Trump's overtly political agenda to prosecute people who wronged him politically. The reason she doesn't have a job is because she wasn't good enough at it. And I do think Pam Bondi can perhaps be a source of cross-ideological agreement. So we have Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives. Does anyone at this table think that Pam Bondi was a good attorney general? Speak now.
Yeah, I think in some cases she was effective, in others she wasn't. Okay. I think the handling of the Epstein files undoubtedly was botched from the beginning.
Donald Trump disagrees with you because he just fired her, so he doesn't think she was any good.
Well, no, he's not saying that she had a failed first year, clearly.
Oh, it's a ringing endorsement.
Done it a long time ago. I mean, clearly, she didn't do what he wanted to get done in that particular position over the course of the year. But that doesn't mean that there were any successes.
What's the best thing she did?
Specifically at crime is down. She's been making a point to go after actual criminals, including cartel-tied cells in this country. She also was the head of the AG's office, as we actually went after the Antifa groups that people pretended didn't exist for about 6 years.
These are great talking points. Let me give you some stats.
It's truth.
Their crime is down across the country. That's a great thing. That's a good thing. Pam Bondi presided over the dismissal and closing out of 23,000 criminal cases, federal cases, gun cases, drug cases, violence cases, more than any DOJ since 2004. She got rid of those cases. Why? So they could do more immigration prosecutions. So yes, crime rates fell. You can attribute that to a whole lot of factors. Never believe anyone who tells you.
They were falling long before Trump.
They were falling, but the fact is,
immigration cases.
DOJ.
No crime.
Would you rather prosecute an immigration case or a gang case?
Crime was falling at historic rates before Trump came into office. That's also true. But I want to get to why she was fired, because I think this is important. She was fired because she didn't go after Trump's political opponents. Now, Trump has put in somebody, his former personal attorney, who I presume he thinks, at least on a temporary basis, will do that. Is this where we're at right now in this country, where it's just like one attorney general after another until he gets the prosecutions that he wants?
Well, I think that's a conclusion that you could jump to. I mean, yeah, this is the second cabinet figure in a few weeks who's been fired. I think most Republicans would look at that, though, and say, look, Trump is eager to find somebody who is competent. And when you look at the things that a lot of Republicans are eager for the attorney general to do, I don't think the lawfare is, and I think as Jason mentioned, a lot of it's going after Antifa. That's a big part of it. A lot of it's going after some of the foreign money that's funding Code Pink and some of the protests.
But he wants the lawfare. I mean, is that appropriate?
Well, so you're
When you step back and look at the bigger picture, this really highlights a deeper issue about how the justice system is supposed to function versus how it's being used. The Department of Justice has traditionally operated with a level of independence from the White House, not just as a norm, but as a safeguard against political influence. Former attorneys general from both parties have emphasized that even the appearance of political pressure on prosecutions can undermine public trust. That's why direct involvement or expectations from leadership about who should be investigated has always been treated as a serious red flag. What makes this even more grounded is the data behind some of the claims being made. Crime trends in the US have been declining overall for decades, with fluctuations influenced by multiple factors like local policing, economic conditions, and demographics, not just federal prosecution priorities. At the same time, shifting focus heavily toward immigration-related cases can mean fewer resources for violent crime, drug trafficking, and organized crime investigations. Legal analysts have pointed out that when tens of thousands of cases are dismissed or deprioritized, it's not just a policy choice. It has real implications for how justice is carried out on the ground. Then there's the broader pattern that's hard to ignore. Replacing key legal figures based on whether they meet political expectations creates a cycle where loyalty becomes more important than independence. Historically, when legal systems become politicized, it often leads to retaliation between administrations, where each side targets the other once power shifts. That kind of environment doesn't just affect politicians. It weakens institutions over time and makes it harder for the public to trust that laws are being applied fairly and consistently.
So no, but I wouldn't frame it that way. The same way that you guys didn't frame it when Steve Bannon was targeted.
Come on, no
when
Democrat sent out a tweet asking to prosecute 3 specific people.
You
and
had
those
people who
specific
said
people
that you
was
wanted
there
to
any
throw
specific
Donald
post
Trump
from a Democrat?
in jail, and you wanted to take him off of a ballot so he
Who are these
couldn't run
people?
for
Who are these
president.
people?
The entire state of Colorado and the Democratic Party.
Okay, so
clearly, this idea, the framing, I think your point is a valid one when it comes to
that is very
optics.
different from the
Why?
president directing his attorney general in public, mind you, as he did. Pam, I've reviewed the 30 statements. What about Comey, Adam Schiff, Letitia? He publicly, right? He's doing this. It's very different from a state doing whatever they're doing, from a local, district attorney prosecuting a case. That is different. When the president says, "Why are you not prosecuting these people who I
he
hate?"
believes broke laws.
Okay,
now,
but it's
you
not
can
his place
disagree
to do
as to
that.
whether or not they broke any laws, and you can have a fair argument, I think, about the appropriateness of the president doing it. But I do think that the framing is important.
So you're defending
when
it then?
I'm defending the president saying someone, in his view, broke the law, and we should be targeting that person. The same exact way Democrats said that about Donald Trump, and it wasn't framed as Donald Trump is being targeted as a political
Jason,
adversary.
you're making that sound as if it's reasonable, and it's not, okay? The president making a unilateral determination in his own mind that somebody has broken the law without providing, by the way, any proof of that, and then directing an investigation into that person is
calling for an investigation versus
that is not appropriate.
Let me
Okay,
try-
I'm sorry. If you don't like partisan prosecutions, you should also not like that.
Even if we take it as a given that there was prosecutorial overkill against Donald Trump, and I've said publicly that I believe there was, especially from the state actors, and even to an extent from some of the federal prosecutions from Jack Smith, that does not justify going out and charging Letitia James for mortgage fraud. And that was rejected by a judge and a grand jury. It does not justify charging Jim Comey. I'm no fan of Jim Comey with an age-old, flimsy perjury charge. It does not justify trying to charge Mark Kelly and Alyssa Slotkin for something that is simply not a crime. And if this is going to be the way things go, you did it to me, I'm going to do it to you. Are you okay with, let's say there's a Democrat, hold on. Let's say there's a Democratic president. There will be a Democratic president at some point in this country's future. Are you okay with them saying, this is the game now, we're gonna go seek out everyone on the other side who displeased us?
Unfortunately, that's already a talking point. J.B. Pritzker is already talking about Project 2029 and trying to put Trump officials in jail.
I'm not okay with that.
It highlights a deeper issue about how the justice system is supposed to operate versus how it's being framed. The Department of Justice has long followed internal guidelines that emphasize independence from political pressure, especially from the White House. That's not just tradition, it's a safeguard built after events like Watergate, where abuse of power showed exactly why separating politics from prosecution matters. When a president publicly calls for specific individuals to be investigated or charged, it crosses a line that previous administrations have generally avoided for that exact reason. What makes this even more grounded is how the legal system actually works in practice. Prosecutors don't just go after someone because a political figure believes a law was broken. They need evidence that can hold up in court. And we've already seen examples where accusations against public figures were reviewed and dismissed by judges or grand juries due to lack of evidence. That process is intentional. It's designed to prevent exactly the kind of back and forth retaliation that can happen when legal decisions are driven by political motives rather than facts. Without that standard, the system becomes less about justice and more about power. Then there's the long-term consequence that's hard to ignore. Once the idea takes hold that each administration can target the other, it creates a cycle that's difficult to break. Political scientists often point to other countries where this pattern led to weakened institutions and declining public trust. And even here, surveys have shown that confidence in federal institutions drops when people believe they're being used for political purposes. That's why maintaining clear boundaries matters, because once those lines blur, it's not just politicians affected, it's the credibility of the entire system.
Fortunately, this seems to be a sort of tit for tat thing. And I guess to your point, I mean, the system is working, right? So there was evidence that Letitia James may have committed some mortgage fraud that was looked into, and ultimately a jury of her peers decided that wasn't legitimate. So I think there was...
I'm glad the system is working against the person who's actively trying to destroy it. I mean, the beautiful part of America is that we have institutions and checks and balances that are separate from the president. You can see time and time again, Donald Trump is trying to bully other institutions under his wing. So we can look at Jerome Powell at the Federal Reserve. If you look at countries where the president is able to control monetary policy, these are some of the worst countries in the world, right? You do not want the president controlling monetary policy. This has happened in countries like Venezuela. Let's take this over to the DOJ. You do not want the president directing the DOJ to prosecute people, to indict people, and that is exactly what we saw. We just watched a clip of Pam Bondi saying, there will never be an enemies list at the DOJ. Well, Abby just read off an enemies list that Donald Trump quite literally sent out. Has any Democrat, did Joe Biden do that? Is there any example of Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, or any of them having an enemies list?
Letitia James and Alvin Bragg, people literally ran on putting Donald Trump in jail. I think we can all agree that there was politicization.
So, but in answer to his question, which is important, is there an example that you all can cite of the president directing the investigation
Joe
or the
Biden's staff did
prosecution
not tweet on his behalf.
Anyone?
No, they didn't put it out there in public.
All right, well,
That's the
good.
difference.
I'm glad that we're in agreement on that.
There's agreement on that. The president is more public about this, and I don't think that is a smart move from
It's not that he's more public about it. It's that he is doing it when there is zero evidence that it was done by the people that he claims did it to him. You guys are attributing investigations in Georgia and investigations in New York to Joe Biden with no proof. That doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry, it does not make sense.
There was a tradition that the President of the United States, the White House, did not talk to the Department of Justice. When I was at the White House, literally, you couldn't call the Department of Justice and ask about a press release without talking to the counsel's office first and getting clearance. This idea that the President of the United States can direct the Attorney General to go after his individual enemies is going to corrupt the entire system. And it will go, when it starts to be a Democratic president doing this, people on the table will howl when they see it. But I'll say this about Donald Trump. Nobody can program the news better than this guy. He flailed last night. Last night, he gave a horrible speech. He's bad at doing it. I understand why he doesn't do it, because he wasn't very good at it. He didn't give us any headline about the war. And this morning, he dropped this news about Pam Bondi. And now the headline of the news is about Pam Bondi. And we're not talking about that bad speech he gave about.
It points to a bigger issue about how institutions are supposed to function versus how they're being pushed. The Department of Justice has long operated under strict norms separating it from direct White House influence, especially after reforms in the 1970s following Watergate. Those rules weren't random. They were designed to prevent exactly this kind of pressure, where political leadership could steer investigations towards specific individuals. When that boundary starts to blur, it's not just about one case. It's about weakening a system that relies on independence to maintain credibility. What makes this even more grounded is how the system actually works when it's left to operate normally. Investigations into public officials, whether in New York, Georgia, or elsewhere, are handled by state-level prosecutors or independent bodies, not directed by the president. In fact, legal experts have repeatedly pointed out that there's no evidence showing federal coordination from the White House in those cases. That distinction matters because it shows the difference between independent legal processes and centralized political influence. Once that line is crossed, it changes how justice is perceived and applied. Then there's the long-term consequence that's hard to ignore. If one administration openly pressures legal institutions, it sets a precedent for the next to do the same. Political scientists often point to countries where this pattern led to cycles of retaliation, with each side targeting the other once in power. And even in the US, public trust in institutions drops when people believe they're being used politically. That's why maintaining those boundaries isn't just about tradition, it's about protecting the system from turning into a tool of whoever happens to be in charge at the time. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.